Great innovation stories make change possible. Each week on the Innovation Storytellers podcast, I invite innovation leaders to share how they overcame the obstacles to introduce breakthrough ideas to the world through the power of story. I'm featuring guests from Tesla, TD Ameritrade, Corning, Cisco, Bloomberg, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can tell a more effective innovation story and change the future for the better. Hey, everybody. It's your host, Susan Lindner. I'm back with another episode of Innovation Storytellers, where we bring together some of the best innovators on the planet to talk about the cool and exciting things that they're doing, how we weave corporate innovation through our culture, and also hear some of the bumps and jumps along the way. So I'm very, very happy to have with me today Anthony Mills, who is the Executive Director of Global Innovation Institute and the CEO of Legacy Innovation Group, and also an advisor to numerous advisory boards. And the reason I wanted to have Anthony on is that he is driven by exciting new business ventures to lead ventures that hold the promise of real significant value for both the organization and its markets. And Anthony has been officially recognized by independent sources as a global authority on strategic innovation and innovation-driven growth, as well as management, the future of work, open innovation, and design thinking. And he has taught, consulted, written, and lectured on these topics all over the world. So, Anthony, we are going to dive right into it today. Tell us a little bit about how you got here. How did you first get started in the wacky world of innovation?
Yeah, that's a great question. Coming up, my background was in engineering. I'd studied undergraduate and graduate mechanical engineering, and I got my start in basically my passion I discovered in college was in product development and product innovation. And I got my start in coming out of grad school in the automotive industry. And, I parlayed that, a few years in the automotive industry. Then I worked in the consumer appliance industry. I worked in medical equipment industry. I worked in bicycles of all, products. But it was always focused on really pursuing that next great product, that next great value. And that was really kind of just part of who I always was. And, pursued that career. I've got 25 or 30 years of experience leading product innovation in industry. And then over time, I launched a consulting firm and then got asked to be the executive director of Global Innovation Institute. And really that broadens things up. Now you're looking at, business model innovation and customer experience innovation and many different forms of innovation. But that's kind of how I came up through the process, is really from a product engineering and product innovation standpoint.
And what is the Global Innovation Institute for our listeners who don't know?
Oh, yeah. The Institute is really the world's leading professional certification, business accreditation, and membership organization in the field of innovation. And so it works through a network of providers around the world. We have over 100 providers globally, all over the world, who help deliver our training program. So there's different trainings at different levels inside the organization. And for each one, there's a professional certification that people can pursue. And then we have a business accreditation program where our providers can bring in assessors and do assessments and have the businesses and their assets accredited. And of course, we have the membership program. There's a community of individuals. We have chapters around the world in different cities, and they get together and network. And we have corporate members who have large numbers of their staff trained and certified and engage with us in different ways. So we're very global. We're based in the Midwest, United States, but we have an office in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi, and we have operations going on really globally around the world.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So before we hit record on this podcast, you and I were talking a little bit about some of the innovations that you've worked on. And I'm wondering if you can share some of your own experiences as a fellow innovator before you train the rest of us how to be better innovators. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, one of my more fun stories was I spent a few years working with Whirlpool Corporation, which is the world's largest appliance manufacturer. And Whirlpool had just started a new business unit. It's called the New Business Creation Business Unit. And one of the first things they did to try to seed their funnel of ideas was they ran a business plan competition. And I had just started at Whirlpool, and I was working in technology innovation for one of the groups.
What year was this, Anthony? How far back was this?
This was I think I went there in 2013. So between 2013 and 2015, I was there. And I led a team in this business plan competition, and we actually won the competition, but it was a 6-month long journey and very intense, evenings and weekends. And the fun part with the business plan competition is you've got, 25 other teams that you're competing against, and every team is equally passionate. And when you run an engagement activity like a business plan competition, it really draws out the entrepreneurs in your organization and gets them engaged very passionately in their project. So that adds a lot of dynamism, dynamics to the whole process, makes it a lot of fun. But, in that process, we had to go through all the work of researching the concept, of, pitching the concept, validating the concept. And the concept our team led had to do with home brewing, a home brewing appliance we called Revolution Brew. And so there were a lot of hurdles that we had to jump over, and political battles,
What is Revolution Brew? What is that?
That was just our code name at the time for this home brewing appliance. So, at the
make
time,
your own beer at home.
Yeah, exactly. Brew your own beer at home. Because at the time, in the early 2010s, the craft beer movement was growing exponentially. It's tapered off a little bit since then, but it continues to grow. But it was growing exponentially at the time. And we saw that, there were people who homebrewed, there were craft beer aficionados, and then there were sort of the people who were craft beer aficionados that didn't want to do all the work to build their own homebrew system, spend all day Saturday do it, but they would love to have an automated in-home appliance to do it. So that was the concept, was to give them an automated in-home appliance for brewing beer without all the hassle of traditional beer brewing. So that was the concept, and we got, it's like, I like to say, when you're an innovator, you beg people for their time and for resources, and you sometimes finagle resources and get support you need. And so there were a lot of times where, getting engineers to help us to work on concepts, or getting designers to do some preliminary industrial design work for us. But another way to put it is, really good innovation work, you have to be extremely resourceful. To me, good innovators are extremely resourceful. So you have to be resourceful and find these, and you have to know how to meet with stakeholders. You have to be able to practice diplomacy and be able to tell your story to these stakeholders. So there, outside of formal pitching, there were a number of times I had to meet with different executives in the organization and business unit leaders, ask for their permission to use their brand, or ask for this and ask for that, and get their support and really rally support. And that was.
I want to stop you there for just a sec, because you mentioned one of the key ingredients of getting this done. We always talk about great storytelling helps innovators to get the resources, the runway, and the recognition that they deserve. Mm-hmm. And there's a story for each of those that needs to be told in order to get what you need. I'm like hearing a Rolling Stone song in my head right now, but
can't always get what you need.
That's right. You can't get what you want, but you might get what you need. So, thinking about those stories that you told back in the day, what did that sound like? What kind of stories were there?
For example, there was a lot of debate about what brand we were going to launch this under. Was it going to be one of Whirlpool's existing brands or a new brand? And, different brands had different brand value, brand positions, because Whirlpool owns a number of well-known brands like KitchenAid, for example, that has a lot of brand value. But we also recognize that this home brewing activity was largely gravitated toward men. Okay. And Whirlpool also owns the brand. I can't think of the name of the brand now, but they own a brand that was very male dominated. It had to do with the garage furniture and stuff in the garage. Gladiator, that's the name of the brand. They own the Gladiator brand. So Gladiator was this heavy duty furniture and stuff that went out into the man
like shelving and like workbenches and that kind
shelving
of stuff.
And workbenches, shelving and workbenches and tool sheds and things. So it was all like man cave stuff. And so there are a lot of us that felt like this Revolution Brew thing would fit really well with the Gladiator brand. So I actually set up a meeting with the head of that business unit that ran Gladiator. And I had to tell him the story about, this craft beer aficionados. A lot of them were men, and they had this passion for craft beer and wanting to brew, but they weren't going to invest in all day Saturday in their own homemade machine. They wanted something automated, and it would fit so well right there in the garage, right alongside all the other Gladiator stuff. And so I had to tell him this story, and get this visual image in his mind, how this fit with Gladiator, and really make it fit with Gladiator. And he agreed, yeah, I think it's a fit, and his staff agreed it was a fit. And so basically they gave us their support to use a Gladiator brand in the process.
Us marketing types call that brand alignment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Brand alignment. There was brand alignment. In the long run, however, the CEO basically told us we couldn't use that brand. We had to create our own new brand because he had reservations about the affiliation of alcohol appliances with the corporate brand and any of their brands. So he ultimately made us go with our own brand. But we still had to go through all this process of getting, telling the stories, getting the buy-in, getting the support along the way.
Yeah. And, it's so funny, it seems like such a small detail, but I mean, I'm sure you can remember the kind of the nervousness of going in to pitch that executive, right? And saying, yeah, like we really need this. I really believe in this. This is going to work. And saying, I need to really think about how I'm going to pitch this to someone. It's not just, and I always, talk to clients about painting a picture of the future that our audience can't yet see. Like you are the missionary of the idea, and you have to paint a picture of what balance sheet heaven is going to look like, 8 quarters from now when this thing really takes off.
Yeah, you're right. And I think a way to do that is to really understand the persona of who their key customer is, and using empathy to understand what really resonates with not just so much them, but their customer. So like you said, I want to make sure that we're going to plug something into their brand that's going to bolster their top line. So really to understand their customer. And, we were really good at developing personas for every customer. I actually had like 5 different personas or something of people that would use this. Each one had different psychographics. And, but to take the persona that was his customer and really use empathy to project yourself and tell a story about him in his garage brewing that and how that was going to be a big draw. Yeah, absolutely. That resonates both with his customer and resonates with him who owns that customer.
And it's fascinating because I think one of the challenges of being in a big company is also being terrified of owning a niche, like something very narrow, but very, that has a cult-like following that people feel really passionate about. And if you get it right, you can own those, you can own that persona really for life and expand from there. I was watching a documentary. It was a short little, maybe like a 30-minute discussion about how Subaru targeted the lesbian community for their Subarus. They looked at 5 different personas. They thought, where can we go? And, this is a conservative company from Asia, right? That makes a decision and says, we think we have some really wonderful, very narrow, very niche targets that if we get in, we will have loyal customers forever. And so really thinking about what matters to that community before we even think about what needs to be in the messaging, what needs to be in the design. And so much of that was being in the right place, choosing the right cities for the campaign, figuring out exactly what other causes mattered, not necessarily, and it wasn't, the big political things you might think, but it could be dog parks. Or it could be community centers, or just lazy Sunday afternoons wind up being part of this discussion. And so, then you wind up getting a campaign that resonates with people without ever having to scream the words out loud. We're targeting the LGBTQ, specifically lesbian community for our hatchback Outback cars, right? And so I imagine what that storytelling must have been like inside Subaru that said, we've got a new niche market. Guess what? We're going after lesbians and bisexuals. What do you think about that?
Well, that's the beauty of niche markets, that you can be very specific about the message that you go and do the research, you figure out exactly what resonates with them, what are their psychographics, and then you can really craft your message to be very, very specific to them. And that does create strong resonance, I believe. And that was exactly what we were working toward doing, is really understand our niche, understood what made them tick, and then craft a message that really would resonate with that psychographic.
Yeah. So what happened?
So yeah, ultimately, we went through that 6-month period, and by the way, there were lots and lots of mentors that we tapped into. It was actually an incredible, wonderful learning experience to work with so many wonderful mentors in marketing and finance and consumer pricing and so forth. And ultimately, we were able to define this whole thing. We developed our go-to-market strategy on it, and we packaged that in a business plan. We got to the end of the competition, we pitched it, and of like 20 some teams that went through pitches, and this was a very formal big event there at Whirlpool. Actually 2 teams came out on top, ours and another team. And so after we won the competition, they treated it like, they actually called it Series A, Series B, Series C. And so they gave us additional funding to go do more research. We were actually pretty big ticket market research project we launched out of that to really validate the concept. And then we paid an industrial design firm to do some very professional industrial design mock-ups of it. And, basically that took us to the next level where we had to pitch it yet again to get support. And we got the green light again. And then we got Series C. We got even more. And we had to go do more work. And then they start bringing in the real team. And eventually we got to the point, they green lighted the whole project. Then they brought in, the formal engineering team and did the engineering design and lined up the production partner and so forth. And it got commercialized. It got launched as a product line under the final commercial name of I believe it was Revy. It wasn't Revolution Brew, but it was a different name. But they launched it and commercialized it, and so that product got launched and. For a while, Whirlpool ran that. Then they eventually sold that line of business to another company. So it may still be going, I'm not sure, but they actually sold the line of business off. But it did actually get launched and commercialized in the marketplace. And it was their trade partners on the floor in different places.
Fantastic. And I love hearing these employee innovation stories. How do you run a contest like that and not totally deflate all the other teams who are so excited about their concepts and ideas? How does management not just go, yeah, sorry, try again next year? And just what?
That's a great question, because in the years after I helped the team really run the next evolution of the business plan competition. And one of the things you do is you don't just make it, work they do off and on. You make it an experience. And part of what Whirlpool did so well in that very first, they called it the Spark competition. The very first Spark competition was we brought in some really good speakers. Friends like Mike Bechtel who's at Deloitte now, he's a chief futurist at Deloitte. He came in and spoke, and a number of other really well-regarded innovation people came in and spoke to the group. And so whether or not you win the competition, just the experience of being a part of it and the great speakers and the community and the networking, that in and of itself was extremely rewarding and fun, and useful. So even whether you win or not, just the experience of being a part of it and the energy and the buzz makes it a fun experience. So it's not about just necessarily winning, although winning's great. It's about the whole program and the experience of being in the program. It's like entering into an accelerator program, if you will. There's an experience associated with it, and you graduate.
So it's not just a suggestion box that gets ignored.
No, not with business plan competitions like this. If they're done right, they're very experiential, and you really feels more like some sort of a mini accelerator. And you're having these mentors and you're having these speakers. And when you make it a whole program like that, not just, go do the research and come see us in 6 months, but when you make it a really engaged program like that, people will continue to come back and engage. It's the fun of the process as much as whether you win or lose. Winning is just icing on the cake, but you still have the whole cake.
So it's funny because, we've talked to many consultants on the show who've run these innovation contests, and they talk about how critical it is, because you can create scenarios where, we're looking for ideas. We have to grow our bottom line. We have to grow our top line, let's say, and we need the top 5 best ideas. And then, 2 ideas get picked, the rest get thrown away, and people go, well, what was that for? And so it's really important that this becomes part of a culture of innovation.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And, they did some other fun things along the way. Like before we had the final pitch, there was a preliminary pitch competition where it wasn't being judged on the idea of the business plan. It was purely your ability to pitch. And so one of our teammates, he volunteered to do that. So you can have these interim milestones along the way of things you're doing too, like, preliminary activities, like just the fun pitch part, and becoming good at pitching. So, but you're right. I think that to add on to your point, it's you got to make it more than just about the ideas that people are bringing. The idea is ultimately what you want, but it's the experience of conceiving and developing and validating these ideas and actually who you become as an entrepreneur in that process. And if you can pour energy back into the entrepreneur in the process, then they'll keep coming back. Even if they don't win the contest, they'll keep coming back with more ideas.
So
they see the value of it.
Yeah, let's talk about these entrepreneurs for a minute, because a friend of mine, the author, Greg Larkin, he wrote a book called This Book Could Get You Fired. And it's what it is to really be an entrepreneur inside of a large company and how to do that. And he's now on his second book that he's writing called Punks and Pinstripes. And he's developed this membership community where he refers as entrepreneurs as the punks who need to go up against the pinstripes. And in fact, they need to work together, but that you really can't have one without the other. Like if you're going to create an innovation culture, you actually need people to buck the status quo loudly and at times offensively in order to move things along. Like there is a requirement of friction and spark in order to drive the innovation conversation, because it is a battle to challenge the status quo. And I'm curious what you think about this, because it sounds like a very mild-mannered kumbaya kind of experience to say, we just want the world to drink better beer and, and hope that it all goes swell. Who doesn't love beer?
Right.
Meanwhile, just for giggles here, some of the other competitors must have been very much in alignment with some of the business lines that were already there, right? Some of the business units. Or did you find the other ideas were equally, out there comparatively?
Well, part of the charter of the new business creation business unit is to actually create new types of appliances and new lines of business that were really different than what the company was already doing. It's that venturing activity of exploration.
That blue sky thinking.
Yeah, blue sky. Now, there were some concepts that were like they're accessories to existing products, and they were cool accessories, but they weren't as out there, but what they were really looking for was like completely new appliances, that we can pursue,
like the moonshot idea.
Right. And really, this is the unit, they had already launched a couple of things. They had launched what was called Swash. They launched that with Procter & Gamble, which was in-home dry cleaning box. Again, I don't think this had long-term commercial success. They were working on a composting unit that got launched, so there were these were new appliances that were out of the mainstream appliance line. So yeah, there were, that was really what they were looking for. So that's kind of what most of the ideas that we were competing against were about, were completely blue sky concepts.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but, you're right. I mean, the entrepreneurs, to your point, they're the ones that are the mavericks, if you will. I like to call them mavericks, most of them. And you're 100% right. We need mavericks, entrepreneurs, punks, bricoleurs, whatever you want to call them. We need these people to really keep pushing the envelope and help us see the paradoxes in our existing assumptions and orthodoxies of our business models and how the world is changing, and really challenge us, especially where things are changing, to break away from those orthodoxies and, break out of our outdated assumptions and revisit things and launch new lines of business out of that. We need those type of people. Absolutely.
So how does the Institute actually do this? Like if you could envision yourself back at Whirlpool back in the day, and had you had someone who is certified in some of your processes back then, what do you think might have been different, or, how would this experience have been enhanced?
Well, I think it makes the process a lot smoother because everyone's kind of on the same page at that point with their knowledge of innovation and the language of innovation. And so, and that's actually a lot of what, they were trying to help teach us in the process was some of that language and the concepts and, and so if people have this knowledge up front, it makes the process go smoother and faster. And I think the other important thing critically is it helps the the major stakeholders, the executives, the decision makers, to understand why this is all so important, and not see it as a threat, even though at the end of the day, it may be an existential threat to their business unit, to understand it's a necessity for the overall organization. So to figure out how they're going to embrace these new concepts and not see them as just a threat. I think that would be important. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you stay on top of the trends going on in innovation in practice? So many of us know design thinking. We know some of us are maybe just dipping their toe into innovation storytelling and how to communicate the fruits of innovation or the potentialities around innovation. But how do you, for the Institute, how do you stay on top of all these changing trends?
Yeah, it's largely the same way that many thought leaders do, and that the answer is through extensive research and networking. So we're constantly undertaking research into different veins that different people are going, and whether it's people in the design community or people in the strategy community or people in the storytelling community or people in the neuroscience community. We're constantly doing research into what's going on in these different communities around innovation to understand that, and then as we amalgamate a lot of those insights, we go out and do a lot of networking with different thought leaders and just compare notes and say, here's what we're seeing happening. What do you think about this? Give us your feedback on it. What's your take on this? Things like that. And at the Institute, we have an outstanding board of advisors of like 28 thought leaders around the world in different areas of innovation. And we're often bouncing things off of them and getting their feedback on what we're observing. So between, the expert panel we have and the research we do and the networking we do, we have a fairly good pulse on everything that's evolving and happening in the world of innovation and transformation around the world.
Fantastic. So, I'm also a little bit curious about what you think is coming next. What do you think global innovators, especially ones who are working in really large, complex organizations, what should we be thinking about when we look at the next 5-10 years of innovation? What should maybe need to shift?
Well, I think more and more organizations are recognizing and realizing they need to really focus on formalizing more strategic foresight and strategic futuring efforts, and really developing formalized groups that can lead that. There's ways you'll engage the whole organization again, but to really formalize strategic foresight, strategic futuring, or what we call future shaping, to really formalize that. And the reason is because things continue to accelerate, and the rate of change continue to accelerate. Technology, societal changes, economic shifts, with pandemics and wars and things, always. So that's accelerating. So it really becomes important for us to really be in tune with the different trends that are happening and understand their implications for us, and then to really be able to work through different scenarios for the future. And scenarios are narratives, by the way. They're micro stories, partial stories, if you will. Scenarios are narratives, and really that's what scenario analysis and scenario planning is about. It's about telling stories about the future, and that's why scenario analysis and planning is so incredibly powerful. They actually help us to look at trends and forecast possible futures and probable futures, and then develop some stories, some narratives around that, and tell that to the different leaders in the organization. And that really helps the organization think of all the possibilities and test some of their strategies and the innovations they want to pursue. And that really helps to shape and form our growth and innovation strategies much more intelligently than just sort of, focusing on the here and now. The here and now is important. And we have methods and processes for studying the present market, but we also have to be thinking about the future market and who our future customers are. And we have processes for doing that too. I think that's really what more and more organizations are awakening to, is the need to do that. And there's so many facets that come into play that. And I would, for example, cognitive biases. Cognitive biases actually wreak havoc with our ability to think about the future because of all the filters and biases we bring. So you have to learn what the biases are so you can recognize them when they happen, and then pull back the curtain, if you will, and look through the biases and really see objectively what the future could be.
Yeah, I'm seeing that so often now with innovation teams and really getting very deep into climate science. and understanding the implications for climate on really every aspect of the supply chain, the value chain, and then not just climate and sustainability, but also equity, the human impact of the decisions being made in the boardroom, and taking responsibility and ownership for those. And that's a new facet of, certainly resource planning was always one, but climate planning, where we're not just planning for our business and the bottom line, but we're looking to restore portions of the earth that we've destroyed as part of our work for the last 50 years, right? So there's part of the strategic planning and the future planning that says it is not only my duty to produce a return to shareholders, but it's also my responsibility to clean up the messes that I've made and create innovative solutions that will make all the difference in the world. I was talking with some consultants at one of the big four consulting firms, and they are finding ways by using climate change and really getting deep in understanding climate change to put $100 million back on the balance sheets of their clients. And I think so many of us think about resource planning or, attention to climate change as a losing game, that the investment in that is going to result in fewer dollars rather than more. And yet, potentially your chicken sandwich, with certain adjustments to how the chickens are raised and the feed that's used, and can produce less carbon, can actually produce a better product, can actually get to market with half the carbon emissions, that's currently being used by fossil fuels and so forth. So there, if we're really thinking like good innovators, we can find a bigger bottom line when we do the right thing too, if we take the time to do the analysis.
You're right. It's not just thinking outside the box, but it's thinking about a bigger box and how can we incorporate all the stakeholders. And it's what's called stakeholder capitalism. And actually, there was a group of us from the
if the folks who are picking the stuff and planting the stuff and raising the chickens are part of the stakeholders. And I don't think we've really included those folks as part of the
You're right. It has to be very holistic in that process. So there was a group of us from GI's Board of Advisors who wrote a book about that 1.5 years ago, and it's called The Other Side of Growth and Innovators' Responsibilities in an Emerging World. And the whole point was that we have to step back when we're looking or considering new innovations and consider who are all the stakeholders that those innovations impact, and ask the questions, how will these new innovations impact them, and what are the possible other ways, alternative ways these innovations could be used to create more harm than good. And we have to think much more holistically about who all the stakeholders are and what possible negative consequences our innovations could have. What our friend Bettina von Stam calls the dark side of innovation. Right. It can have a dark side, and we have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, and they're really important trade-offs that will get made. And by the way, Earth as stakeholder, right?
Yes, exactly.
Mama Planet has not been at the boardroom table in a very long time.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. Yes.
All right. So I want to shift a little bit now to our hot seat questions. So I'm going to ask you the questions I ask all of my guests, Anthony. So first off, I want to ask you, greatest invention ever in the history of humanity. What are you choosing?
Wow. The greatest invention ever. I think it's the internet. I think because how it has connected our world, our societies globally, and just like you and I are talking right now via the internet, and we can talk to people all over the world via the internet. And 30 years ago, that wasn't even feasible. I think the internet.
Fantastic. Yeah. And innovation team you would love to have been a part of?
Wow, innovation team, probably, developing maybe something at Apple like the iPod or something, Yeah. I'm sure
we've had guests on the show who are on the iPod team, by the way.
I'm sure it was a very mercurial experience dealing with Steve and Johnny and things, but I'm sure it was a very passionate experience. And what drives me, or what attracts me to teams like this, is that when they're passionate about what they're doing and they really care about the details of what they're doing.
Yes, it makes really all the difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. And our last question is, what is the innovation you would most like to see happen that hasn't happened yet?
Oh, that's an easy one for me.
Oh, yeah.
I want the Star Trek transporter, the one that's beam me up, Scotty, I want that, because then we don't need cars, we don't need trains, we don't need planes. I could travel to Dubai in about 3 seconds,
That's true.
So I don't know if that will ever be feasible. Actually, there's been research on things that relate to it, but the idea that I could just transport myself anywhere in the world instantaneously, that's the invention I've been waiting for all my life, that Star Trek transporter.
Yeah. So your imagination is not going to be sufficient, right? You physically want to be there.
That's right. And, and I could imagine this device existing, and that's the device I want. And unfortunately for those in the transportation industry, that will significantly disrupt all the airlines and the automotive companies, and, autonomous cars won't even matter at that point. We just beam ourselves to where we want to be.
Wouldn't that be nice? If we could only get our cellular structure to abide by our desire to get to Dubai in 15 minutes.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if in 200 or 300 years someone doesn't crack that nut.
That is going to be fantastical.
Because we're amazed at today. If we were to bring someone from 200 years ago and show them what we're doing today, their mind would be blown. They'd be flabbergasted. They'd be like, "There's no way we could have conceived that you'd be doing things like this today." And I think the same thing will be true 200 years from now. The things that they'll be doing would blow our minds. We couldn't even conceive things that are going to be done 200 years from now.
Yeah. So I'll just say one thing about that. I was very fortunate to have the head of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory on the show. And I asked him, how do you actually plan the next 50 years of space travel? How do you even think that far? And I said, when the computing power of a cell phone is more than the space shuttle was when it launched, how do you even conceive of both the computing power that will exist and whatever it is that you create? And he said, we invite Hollywood screenwriters, and we invite futurists and people who have exceptional creative imagination to sit down with our scientists, and we write a fiction about what we would like it to look like. We literally imagine reality into being.
That's right.
And I think about it probably every day that he says that it all began with a great story told amongst 5 or 6 people who said, wow, what a beautiful dream. Let's go build that. And they do.
To me, that's why the most valuable skill, in my personal opinion, of any good innovator is the imagination.
Right. The ability to communicate it out of your head to somebody else.
Right. But to start with, the ability to imagine that which does not yet exist, and imagine what the world will look like that, and then to go articulate that. Here's the dream I have, here's the vision I have, and really get people passionate and bought into that. To me, that's where it all starts, is that vivid imagination that you tell the story around. But your friend at Jet Propulsion Laboratory is absolutely right. You have to imagine that new future and create that vision and work from that.
Yeah. So I think for me, that's a reminder to innovators everywhere is, are you really using the greatest tool you have as the one between your 2 ears to imagine what could be possible? And are you getting the right people around the table to imagine that future with you so you can actually bring it to life?
Amen.
Yeah. Anthony, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Where can people reach you if they want to get...
I have a website, anthonymills.com. You can email me, anthony@anthonymills.com. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look up Anthony Mills and you'll probably find me. And feel free to connect with me or email me, whatever you want to connect. Absolutely.
And the Institute?
The Institute is GInI.org. So if you just go online, look at GInI.org, you'll find the website for Global Innovation Institute, and you can contact us there. If you're interested in anything about the certification programs or the accreditations or membership, reach out to us at GInI@GInI.org, and we'll be happy to answer any queries there. And we have an online community you can join and become a part of and engage in the conversation there.
Fantastic. Anthony, Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Did you know that stories are 22 times more likely to be remembered than facts alone? And because of that, leaders have told us that the way we teach storytelling could save them upwards of $100 million. Prioritizing innovation storytelling has never made more sense, and it's why becoming an innovation storyteller is so critical. Don't wait to discover how high the stakes really are. At Innovation Storytellers, our mission is to help you align others around your ideas for change by harnessing the power of strategic communications and inviting people to step into a better future. Visit our website today at innovationstorytellers.com, and we'll teach you the storytelling skills your organization needs to grow, thrive, and create a future that's worthy of all of us. That's innovationstorytellers.com. I can't wait to hear from you.